All right, welcome back to Prayer of the Barren Womb. We are in part 25 of the Four Rivers of Eden. And just to recap a little bit of on my last series, my last session, part 24, I developed this additional parallel, this what I called a Mandelbrot moment. I just want to go through the parallels that we're seeing in the life of Abram to the life of Adam. And this is the theory that I'm developing, is that we're looking for patterns so that we can determine where we are and at what stage in history we are. So we're looking for the patterns that Adam originally lays down in the garden. And if we can see those patterns again, the scripture is telling us that we're in a transitional stage. For example, in Genesis chapter 11, we've just encountered the third worldwide global judgment event that takes place. And so that in itself is kind of a clue that we are in a transition, but that's not enough. Is that enough to build a pattern off just the idea that that we saw an event? So the third worldwide judgment event is the destruction of the Tower of Babel through the shattering of language and the scattering of the tribes. Okay, humanity has been expelled from their one monolithic location. In addition to that, we have something else that the scripture shows up for us, and that's this peculiar shape of Yibum shows up again for the third time. So that too ought to indicate to us that the scripture is highlighting something here. And what we're attempting to do is extract interpretation from not only this event, but from this shape, this pattern that shows up. Last session, I developed the idea that Abram is walking in the pattern of Adam in two ways. He's formed outside the land in the same way that Adam is formed outside of the garden, and he is brought to the land in the same way that Adam is brought to the garden. Not only that, Abram is brought to the land of promise in a condition of barrenness. We're told in Genesis chapter 11, verse 30, that his wife is barren. Adam is brought into the garden in a condition in which there's no possibility of fruitfulness. He's barren. His wife has still not been extracted from him. So that to me was a remarkable Mandelbrot moment when I saw, oh my gosh, he's walking in the pattern of Adam. In addition to that, he's expelled from the land. Abram is expelled from the land of promise through famine. Adam was expelled from the garden. Then he is placed in the land a second time in the same way that in Genesis chapter 2, we have Adam being placed in the garden twice. It's very interesting. It's like, why are we told that? For an additional level of parallel, there's a stranger now in the house of Abram. And just as there was a stranger in the house of Abram, there's a serpent in the garden that is going to introduce this element of deception. So we saw the themes of deception taking place in Abram's life as well. Instead of deception being brought into the garden through the agency of the Nakash, deception is already rooted in the human heart. Now that we are in the expulsion, now that we are in the upside down world of post-expulsion, we carry with us the seeds of deception in our own heart. We don't need a Nakash to bring deception with us everywhere we go. However, it does need to be rooted out. God desires truth in the inmost parts, and what shows up in Abram and Sarah is a deception. They're playing fast and loose with the truth. They bring deception with them into the land of Egypt, and plagues fall upon Pharaoh's house, and they are sent back to the land of promise. It's an interesting, and this is something that's interesting about the Mandelbrot equations. If you go to any search engine and type in the Mandelbrot set, Mandelbrot equation, fractals, you're going to pull up this visualization of a mathematical equation, and you'll see a shape sitting at the very top level, at the very surface level of the Mandelbrot zooms, and you'll see that shape, and then you'll descend in towards that shape, and you'll start zooming in towards the edges of that shape, and millions of processes later, you'll see that same shape emerge again as you zoom in towards the edges of the shape. That same shape will show up again, but it'll be slightly altered. And this is one of the fascinating parallels, I think, between the Mandelbrot set and the Torah. We'll see that same shape of deception that we originally noted in the garden, but it's morphed a little bit. Instead of being present through the agency of a third party, that deception is now within us. And so the theme of deception, that shape is there, but it's morphed a little bit. And so you can see the same thing in the Mandelbrot zooms. And so to me, this is another elegant parallel between the Mandelbrot zoom and the Torah. In any case, we have here 7 or 8 parallels between Abram and Adam. So this is indicating to me that we are once again in a recreation storyline. It doesn't look the same because the earth isn't destroyed. The recreation event is taking place within a single man who is going to become the nation of Israel. And this nation is going to be the means by which God is going to demonstrate his wisdom and his beauty and invite all the nations of the world to come into covenant with him once again and to be connected with the Creator through the covenant of Torah. So there are going to be alterations. The same themes will be in place, but they will look slightly different than they did originally. And that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind as we move forward. Okay, so we've got 7 or 8 parallels already in the life of Abram, and that's only, getting us through to Genesis chapter 12 and beginning of chapter 13. What I want to draw your attention to now is in this is 25, so 24, 20. In the I believe the 23rd chapter, vlog, whatever you want to call these things, I introduced this idea of promise versus process, and that's what I want to dive into right now. Promise versus process was first emerged in the life of Abram when he's promised all these great things. He's going to become a great name. He's going to become a great nation. This land is going to be given to him. All nations of the earth are going to be blessed through him. And then God extracts him from his family and from his land and brings him to the land of promise. So that is God's promise. The process is the means by which this is going to happen. How are these promises going to be fulfilled? And that's on us. A lot of times what we'll do in our humanness and in our limited understanding is we'll introduce our own visualization and our own thinking into what God has promised, and we'll attempt to mold those things into reality. And Abram passes a test here. What I suspect I would have done with given the same promises is I would have begun to build castles. I would have begun to build infrastructure, political processes. I would have begun putting people into office and build an army and build walls around my city. I would have begun to make a claim on the territory. If that was the promise God gave me, I would have begun to act on it. What does Abram do? He continues to dwell in a tent. The only permanent things Abram makes is altars, places of sacrifice, places of honoring God. He continues to live in tents. So there's promise versus process, and I think Abraham passes a huge test here in his ability to, hey, I don't know how this is going to happen. God says this is my land. I'm not going to push the issue. If God said it's going to happen, I'm going to let him do it. And so this is a huge victory, or I'd say an advance in maturity in Abram's life. And I think there's a strong takeaway for us there as well. Not to put our visualization into how we think things are going to transpire. How is this going to work out? I don't know how it's going to work out. God told me it would. So I think we see another one of these events take place in promise versus process when we get to the life of Lot. And that's a good question to ask, is who is Lot to Abram? Okay, you've just been promised this magnificent promise, but there's a problem. Your wife is barren. You've perhaps adopted your brother's son into your family and you take him with you as you go. What might you be tempted to think about Lot? That's a little clunky. Who is Lot to you now? You and your wife are barren. God has promised you a great nation, and you've taken your brother's son into your family. Is there a temptation to consider Lot your adopted son? And we don't know. The text doesn't tell us, but my suspicion, my guess, and this is just pure speculation on my part. There's no dogma here at all, but I suspect that there was an adoption event, that Abram officially took Lot under his wing and perhaps thought of Lot as the means by which God would cause him to become a great nation and cause his name to be great and to bless him. That, I think, would be a very natural outgrowth from his situation, being promised these things, but being barren. What are you going to do with that? Well, you've taken Lot into your family. Maybe it's through Lot that all these promises are going to be fulfilled. So there's a strong inclination, I believe, in Abram's part to think of Lot as his son and the vehicle, the means by which God is going to grant these promises. All right. So this could be a second test. This could be a second way that Abram is letting go of process and trusting in promise. Let's take a look at Genesis chapter 13. And it's interesting how many times the name Lot is spoken in the opening chapters. His name is spoken almost as much as Abram's. I didn't do a count, but as I started considering the story of Lot, he becomes incredibly prominent in these opening chapters of Abram's life. In fact, downstream, I would guess, probably 600 years. Downstream from where we are right now in the Bible story, Lot once again becomes prominent and, in fact, becomes tied into the Messianic bloodline. And I have a theory about that, but right now we'll set that aside. All I want to draw our attention to right now is how prominent Lot is in the storyline. And it's like, so we'll just begin in chapter 13, verse 1. Then Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him. So he's being kicked out of Egypt now, and Lot is coming with him back to the land of promise. Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold, and he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord, Lot also. So it seems as if the scripture is emphasizing Lot's presence throughout this whole Egypt debacle. Lot is being emphasized. Lot also went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Now the land was not able to support them, that they might dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. Interesting little phrase comes next. The Canaanites and the Perizzites dwelt in the land. So Abram said to Lot, please, let there be no strife between you and me, and between mine herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right, or if you go to the right, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the plains of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahovah, destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of Yahovah, like the land of Egypt, as you go toward Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from one another. Okay, so what I want to point out is the word brethren, that perhaps this is a transitional moment in Abram's life when he reevaluates who Lot is to him in his life. Is Lot my son that I adopted, or is Lot my brother who stepped into the role of Haran, my fallen brother? Has Lot stepped into that role? So I think one of the things that the scripture is pointing out to us, and we see this again after the battle of the 9 kings, where Abram is identifying clearly Lot not as a child of his, but as a brother. And I think this is an important distinction, that Abram realizes that this is not the guy. And there's midrash, there's discussion, ancient discussion on this conflict between the herdsmen of Abram and the herdsmen of Lot. It is said that the reason this sentence, the Canaanites and the Perizzites dwelt in the land, is that the land deed, or the transfer of wealth, the transfer of property from God to Abram had not yet happened. And as a result of that, Abram's moral character dictated that he would not graze his flocks on another person's land. The thinking is that Lot's herdsmen saw the land as already belonging to Lot, because obviously Abram is barren. There's no other inheritor of these promises than Lot. The herdsmen of Lot saw the land of the Canaanites and the Perizzites as an inheritance from God to Lot, and so they saw no challenge with grazing their flocks on the land of another person. And so there was conflict. There was a conflict between the herdsmen of Abram and the herdsmen of Lot. This is the midrash. This is the midrash that is going on. This is an ancient discussion about why there was conflict. The herdsmen of Abram, the shepherds, I should say, of Abram, saw that this would be a moral failure to graze their herds on somebody else's property, and wouldn't do it. Lot's shepherds saw this as their own, because obviously Lot's the inheritor. So this is an interesting, and it's just occurring to me now as I speak. Shepherds are interesting in the Bible. They're considered guardians of the flock, and you can see this on the level of spiritual truth, how pastors are considered guardians of the flock. All right, I'm going to cut that one off right here. I'm not going to go down there. But this is interesting, that it's possible that the shepherds of Lot saw Lot as the inheritor of Abram's estate. So to me, this lends support to the idea of an adoption, that Abram saw Lot as his son and the means by which God, I mean, it was obvious, right? There's no one else is going to do the job for him. So when Lot and Abram separate, I think there's a letting go of process in Abram's mind, saying, and transitioning Lot from son to brother, and saying in his own mind, this guy can't be the inheritor of my estate. He doesn't have the moral fiber to be a great land, and to be a great nation, and to be a people in whom God would reveal his wisdom and his ways. Lot is already playing fast and loose with morality. Lot is already assuming things that are not yet in place. He cannot be the inheritor of the estate. So Abram, I think, is showing us once again his ability to relinquish process the way he understands it to God. It's like, God, I don't know how you're going to get me there. I thought maybe Lot was the guy. I thought maybe he was my inheritor. I thought maybe you would build up my name and my nation through him. I'm barren. How are you going to make this happen? I don't know how you're going to make it happen, but you are faithful. And I trust you to make a way when there is no way. So he lets Lot go and walks away from, I believe, the emphasis of the scripture here is he walks away from his brother Lot, rather than son Lot. Anyhow, that is kind of my understanding right now. And again, I derive this from ancient midrash, ancient discussion. So this would also explain, now this is interesting, and we get to, I'll just pick up in verse 11. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other there. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against Yahovah. Now, once Abram and Lot separate, then Yahovah blesses Abram. We read in verse 14. And Yahovah said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him. So there's an interesting thing that seems to be highlighted here, that the scripture is going to a lot of trouble to repeat itself. And Lot went with him, and Lot went with him, and Lot separated himself from Abram, and Lot separated. And after this, the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, I give to you and to your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants could also be numbered. Arise, walk in the land through its length and through its width, for I give it to you. Then Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and he built there an altar to Yahovah. So we have this division and separation taking place between Abram and Lot, which kind of reminds me of a division between the truth and the knockoff. You know, you can buy Gucci bags on the street of New York City for $20. They look like Gucci's from about 100 feet away, but when you get up close, it's not the real deal. And I think that's kind of the juxtaposition that we're setting up between Abram and Lot. Abram's the real deal. He's got genuine heart connection to the Creator. Lot is kind of like, and we'll see this again in this story of Genesis 19. Lot is kind of like deaf guy dancing. Yeah, I mean, a deaf guy could look at a mob of people dancing and maybe pick up a few moves, but he's not actually hearing the music. Yeah, from a distance you might be able to see that he's moving his body. He's got a few of the moves down, but he can't really hear the music. I think Lot is kind of, that would be analogous to Lot. I mean, he can see, what kindness looks like to strangers because he's been living in the house of Abram, and Abram is noted for his mercy and his kindness. But he's not really syncing up with the heart of the issue. Yeah, okay, you take a stranger into your house, you make them a meal, you wash their feet, but there's, it's like tick mark Torah. Okay, yeah, I can keep the Sabbath. Yeah, I can eat clean. Yeah, I can keep the feasts. But if our heart isn't understanding what's at the core, then we can be a lot like Lot. We can look from on the outside like we're doing it. But if our heart is not engaged from a posture of love, then that's the best we can do. And to be honest, that's my starting point. That's where I began. It's like I didn't understand Torah. I didn't understand my Hebrew roots, but I knew there was something off with what I had come to understand was Christianity, when everything that I was doing, I couldn't identify in the Bible. I couldn't find, Christmas in the Bible. I couldn't find Easter in the Bible. I couldn't find where the Sabbath had been changed to Sunday. I was off course. So I was in course correction mode, and my heart had not yet engaged with the motive of love. And so that's still a work in progress. And I confess that to you, that a lot of times I'm walking this Torah process. Torah, you hear the word Torah observant. And I think I understand that. I understand people, yeah, I'm a Torah observant follower of Yeshua. I think a better phrase might be Torah pursuant. That I don't think any of us can, we're not even in the land. There's things that we can't do in terms of our Torah understanding of discipleship of Yeshua. But we can pursue that, we can do. So I like the phrase Torah pursuant to describe myself. All right. I seem to have wandered off course a little bit. Anyhow, I think I'll leave this here. And we'll pick up with the story of the 9 kings and Abram's rescue of Lot. Yeah, I think I'll cut it off right here and see how I did.